Good evening, fellow patriots. Welcome back to our channel. It has been quite some time since the last time we posted a video. We've had some personal things come up, and so we wanted to apologize. A lot of things have been happening, but we're back, and hopefully more consistently now. So we've got some new information, got some new news that we want to bring to you. Last week, Tucker Carlson had a very interesting segment regarding climate change. Now, what's really interesting over the past couple of years, maybe even a decade, is we've really gotten a taste of the fact that not everything is as innocent as we would like. Unfortunately, politics has embedded itself in just about everything. Here's an example. When it comes to journalism, we always thought that journalism was a high profession, something to be respected, right? We always thought journalism was for the people. Unfortunately, over the past several years, we've seen propaganda, to be quite honest with you, people pushing a particular narrative. And unfortunately, due to this, it really makes you question where these people are coming from. It makes you question their reliability, their trustworthiness, their honesty. Here's what I mean. Let's take, for example, the current economy. I don't think anybody can deny we're struggling. There's a lot of red alerts going on right now. I mean, we've got banks failing, we've got high prices, inflation. What did this administration do? This administration told us there would be no inflation. This administration then told us that it was all transitory. This administration then told us that it was Putin's fault, and so on and so forth. And the lies continued, or the goalposts continued to move. You would think that if journalists were actually honest, and I'm speaking specifically about the left-leaning legacy news media, right? You would think that they at some point would call this current administration out for their obvious lies. And they haven't. What they've done is they've ran article after article, either justifying, finding ways to poke holes in the obvious finger pointing or the issues or the problems. They've even gone as far to tell you how inflation could be good for you, right? And to lower your standards. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen that. So that should be a good indicator that if these people are telling you to do that, they're not for you. They're not for the people. They're not for us. Really, their protection under the First Amendment is their job was to expose corruption for us, the people. They're not supposed to be hiding corruption or placating the corruption because their political party that they favor is in power and they want to protect them at any means possible, right? That's not what it's meant to be. For quite some time, we have suspected, we on the right have suspected that the media has been colluding or censoring us, right? And in some cases, we actually suspected that it was by the government. The government was giving them that order, and they were like, no, that's not false. That's not true. That's very false, and so on and so forth. And then thankfully, here comes Elon Musk, buys Twitter, and exposes what's going on behind the scenes. This is just one tech media platform. We can assume easily, because of the lies, that the other ones are also Facebook, YouTube, etc., right? That they were all doing the same thing, right? You've got these government officials were coming in and they were in some cases requesting for censorship. Now, if you're on the media, how can you support censorship at all? Imagine you being censored if you're on the left, right? Would you go for that? Obviously not. No one in a democracy, obviously we're a republic, should be censoring anybody. Not for politics, not for things that are, I mean, one thing is illegalities, another thing is threats. I understand that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about difference of politics, difference of views, etc., right? What else can we see that they've lied about? How about the stuff that took place with J6? Tucker Carlson about 2 weeks ago exposed video that was hidden by Nancy Pelosi, right? And it was provided to him by current Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. And he exposes, or he shows additional video, additional footage that really goes against the narrative of it being an insurrection and so on and so forth, right? At the very least, you got to ask questions. Now, we're going to do a video at some point regarding that. I do have video from that day from people's cell phones that also add on to what Tucker Carlson obviously reported on. Now you would think the media. I'm not talking about the politicians because I understand the politicians. It makes them look bad. It makes them look like liars. But the media would be applauding this type of investigative journalism, and they're not. Why? Because obviously it makes them look bad. Why? Because they're the ones covering for the leftist, political, corrupt left politicians, right? So because it's exposing their lies, they're all, against it. What else do we see? The things going on with C19 and getting the shot, right? We've seen where we've been told repeatedly how this was all natural. There's no possible way that this could have come from a lab, and that's just a conspiracy theory. And so, how long before that becomes definitive? I mean, there's already enough things going around. In my eyes, it's definitive. Right? Tucker Carlson had a Chinese virologist come on, and she attests, based on her research, based on her findings, based on her knowledge. True science would look at that, look at the information, examine it, test it, and see if there's validity on it. But no, that's not what they do. They shut it down, they shut her down, etc. Right? Come forward now to where we're at. Climate change. Let's talk about climate change. It's really interesting because a couple of months ago, I think in our episode 9, we had a video. We showed a video of Candace Owens coming on to Tucker Carlson's show, and she made some really interesting claims, ones that were really familiar to me because I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. And so let's take a look. Let's hear what she says just as a refresher.
I was a kid, I was told it was global warming. Hide under your desk, kids. The polar bears are going to drown because there's global warming. But they stopped using that language around 2011 because accidentally the earth started to cool and disproved their narrative. Before my generation, by the way, Tucker, there was a generation that was told global cooling was going to spell the end of the world. Except what happened was they were proven wrong and the earth started to warm. There was the ozone layer. Remember the ozone layer, the hole in the ozone layer. Yes. Oops, that actually wasn't a tragedy, and so they moved on. There was the acidic oceans. There was going to be acidic rain because the oceans were acid. Oops, that didn't happen, and so they moved on. They've been wrong over and over and over again. Their climate models are a complete fraud, and yet they're still allowed to look you in the face when a natural disaster strikes and tell you, well, you know what, I know we've been wrong forever and we've never once gotten it right, but give us your money anyways. These people are sick.
That was Candace Owens, and I'm not a scientist, but what she said regarding the constant goalpost moving is true. I remember growing up in the 90s, like I said, I heard all about global warming, right? That was the thing, the hole in the ozone, et cetera, et cetera. It's funny how that at some point shifted to climate change. And if what she says about an ice age is true, because that's prior to my time being born, then it just shows a pattern of them constantly changing the goalpost every time one of their predictions isn't met. And so here's the interesting part, and we're going to, is that Tucker Carlson actually, his segment last week, really highlighted and showcased that moving goalpost. So let's check that out real quick.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight it's been a tough couple of years for the experts. When it comes to big public policy questions, complicated adult stuff like war and disease and the economy, really the only things that matter, the assumption in Washington has for many years been that you should not worry about it. Don't sweat the details. That's not your role as a citizen and as a voter. We don't have that kind of democracy, the kind where you might actually participate. No, your job is to trust the experts and their conclusions and then obey them. But COVID kind of blew that up. If there's one thing we learned from that disaster, it's that public policy experts very often had no clue what they were talking about. Your hippie aunt in Mendocino County knew a lot more about how to beat a flu virus than your average virologist on CNN. Your aunt would tell you to go outside, get some exercise, some sunlight, some fresh air, stop eating junk food, turn off your computer once in a while, spend time with other people. Be healthy. That advice worked. The experts, by contrast, made you get the vaccine, and that did not work. So by March of 2021, people are starting to figure this out. Anyone who was paying attention in America understood that the experts, many of them, were full of it. And it was exactly at that moment that the Atlantic magazine in Washington published a piece pushing back against the growing consensus. That story was entitled, "Following Your Gut Isn't the Right Way to Go." It's hard to think of a funnier headline, really, mostly because it's so spectacularly absurd. You should always trust your gut, obviously. It is the one thing that will never betray you. But the Atlantic magazine wanted you to know that your natural instincts are, in fact, worthless. The experts had a rough year, the magazine conceded, but we still have to trust them. Right. Actually, we don't have to trust them. And on big questions of public policy, we absolutely should not trust them. It's a democracy. But Washington is continuing to demand that we do trust them. Why? There may be a reason. Maybe COVID isn't the only big project they have in mind for us, a project the experts will justify at MSNBC. And indeed, it's not. There is the climate change agenda. And the climate change agenda is the single most ambitious effort to remake human civilization in all recorded history. And it's coming. In fact, it's already in progress. The only reason that millions and millions of Americans aren't protesting in the streets tonight over this effort to completely overturn their lives is that on some level, many people still do trust the experts, at least on climate change. But should they? We were pondering that this morning when we saw that the world's most famous climate change expert, Greta Thunberg of Sweden, just deleted a tweet she wrote in June of 2018. Here it is, quote, "A top climate scientist is warning that climate change will wipe out all of humanity unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years. The scientist, of course, was a Harvard professor, so obviously that prediction was going to be correct. But here we are still driving our Silverados and still alive, and some of us are still happy. So it does make you wonder if Greta Thunberg, the greatly revered Greta Thunberg, a perennial finalist for the Nobel Peace Prize, could have gotten that so wrong. What else have the climate experts gotten wrong? And how long have they been getting it wrong? Well, fortunately, the Competitive Enterprise Institute has done the research on this, and it turns out these people have been very wrong for a very long time. 1969, the New York Times was printing climate hysteria from an expert called Paul Ehrlich. Quote, "We must realize that unless we are extremely lucky, everybody will disappear in a cloud of blue steam in 20 years. That was Paul Ehrlich in 1969. Well, here it is, 2023, and that same Paul Ehrlich, who's now 90 and still publishing books and still being cited on 60 Minutes, is still telling us that we're all going to die. Now, clearly, Paul Ehrlich had some sort of traumatic childhood he's been inflicting on the rest of us for over 50 years. And for over 50 years, his fellow experts have taken him seriously. Now, back then, of course, climate change didn't mean global warming. It meant a new ice age. In 1970, the Boston Globe reported, quote, "Scientists predict a new ice age by 21st century. According to the Globe, air pollution may obliterate the sun and cause a new ice age in the first third of the next century." An ice age. In 1972, Brown University's science department sent a letter to the White House explaining that they had deep concern with the future of the world because this ice age falls within the rank of processes which produced the last ice age. 2 years later, in 1974, The Guardian reported that, quote, "Spy satellites show new ice age is coming fast." And the report cited, just for moral weight, analysis carried out at Columbia University. Then, a few years later, 1977, the actor Leonard Nimoy, who was not a science expert technically, but played one at one point on television, shot this video.
"We are unprepared for the next advance. The result could be hunger and death on a scale unprecedented in all of history. What scientists are telling us now is that the threat of an ice age is not as remote as they once thought. During the lifetime of our grandchildren, Arctic cold and perpetual snow could turn most of the inhabitable portions of our planet into a polar desert."
Hunger and death on an unprecedented scale. Someone else with the tragic childhood he inflicted on the rest of us. But by the early 1980s, when the ice didn't arrive, well, the experts decided the problem wasn't too much cold, it was too much heat. It was global warming. In 1989, the Associated Press ran this story, quote, "A senior UN environmental official says entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. other words, 23 years ago. That same year, 1989, a climate expert called Jim Hansen met with a reporter from Ceylon. According to Ceylon, Hansen explained that within 20 or 30 years, quote, the West Side Highway, which runs along the Hudson River in Manhattan, will be underwater. Underwater. We checked tonight, and actually it's congested, but still a road. Then in March of 2000, the Independent newspaper ran a piece explaining that snowfalls are now just a thing of the past. And we're quoting, snow is starting to disappear from our lives. The piece quoted a climate expert claiming that, quote, children just aren't going to know what snow is. No idea what snow is. It'll be a relic, not of the Ice Age, but of the great inferno of global warming. Then, in 2004, amazingly, civilization still existed. The Guardian predicted that, quote, major European cities will be sunk beneath rising seas as Britain is plunged into a Siberian climate by 2020, which is a little confusing because global warming doesn't typically produce a Siberian climate. And it was around this time that they decided, hey, we don't want to get pinned down on the details. Will it be too hot? Will it be too cold? We don't want to say. Something bad's going to happen, so we're going to call it climate change. And that paved the way for Al Gore, who in 2006 released his famous documentary, An Inconvenient Truth. And the beauty of An Inconvenient Truth is now that it's been, well, inconveniently more than 15 years since it came out, we can fact check its claims. Here's the trailer.
If you look at the 10 hottest years ever measured, they've all occurred in the last 14 years.
And the hottest of all was 2005. This is Patagonia, 75 years ago, and the same glacier today. This is Mount Kilimanjaro, 30 years ago, and last year. Within the decade, there will be no more snows of Kilimanjaro.
Al Gore also said there would be no ice in the Arctic. He quoted researchers, climate researchers, experts, and he explained that, quote, the North Pole will be ice-free in the summer by 2013 because of man-made global warming. Now, it does take a certain level of chutzpah to make a prediction that precise, and Al Gore made many of them, and all of them turned out to be wrong. And for a normal person, that would be a cue, maybe it's time to retire. I'm rich on Google stock, maybe I could just stop talking because, of course, I've been disgraced by my own foolish predictions. But no, he kept going, and he was helped in that by the entire news media. It makes you wonder why. News organizations exist to bring you the news, to assess whether things are true or not. But if all of them collude to hide lying, you have to ask, is there something else going on here? We'll let you decide. We do know that by 2006, NBC News informed the world that, quote, a leading U.S. climate researcher says the world has a 10-year window till 2016, a window of opportunity to take decisive action on global warming and avert catastrophe. Well, of course, by their predicted date, Donald Trump became president, but that's not what they were predicting. In 2008, the Associated Press reported that according to a top NASA scientist, in 5 to 10 years, the Arctic will be free of sea ice in the summer. That didn't happen, but of course no one was ever held to account for bad predictions, so they just kept going. John Kerry, now our climate czar, cited that very same science in 2009. Watch.
You have sea ice, which is melting at a rate that the Arctic Ocean now increasingly is exposed. In 5 years, scientists predict we will have the first ice-free Arctic summer.
What's hilarious is this is a guy who's never had a job. He's only been in politics. He's never done one useful thing. He's not a scientist. He's never done research. He's actually not an expert, but because he's way more aggressive than you are, and because he has access to the media, which amplify his claims, he poses as one. Now, what's strange about the prediction you just heard is that John Kerry's prediction contradicts Barack Obama's famous climate prediction from a year earlier. You probably remember this.
Because if we are willing to work for it and fight for it and believe in it, then I am absolutely certain that generations from now, we will be able to look back and tell our children that this was the moment when we began to provide care for the sick and good jobs to the jobless. This was the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal.
Sad to watch that, all the cheering people, they seem so sincere. He's going to save the world. He can control the weather. He's Jesus. But in fact, the global healing Obama promised at the beginning of his first term never came, and neither did the global destruction. Here, by the way, is Neil deGrasse Tyson, another great predictor of things, saying that by 2014, the Statue of Liberty will soon be underwater.
You know what I tell people? This wakes them into, here in the New York metropolitan area, I say, if we lose the ice caps, you know how high the water will be? I said, maybe a couple of feet. No, it would come up to the Statue of Liberty's elbow, the one that's holding the Declaration of Independence. That's where the water line will be.
That man's a scientist. And of course, climate does change. It has always changed. In fact, the landscape we live in now is formed by climate change. The glaciers are a product of climate change. The climate is changing now. It never stops changing. That is a process that we didn't cause and that we can't control to any great degree. We'll never be able to control. And there are upsides to it and downsides to it. By the way, if the Earth is indeed getting warmer, and it seems to be, well, then that will make more arable land in places like Canada and Northern Europe. So, like everything in this life, in the temporal world, it's a mixed blessing. But you only hear the downsides, which tells you a lot. It tells you this is not science, it's manipulation. These aren't reports from the experts. These are threats. Here's Joe Biden.
That's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger. The latest climate report, nothing less than, quote, code red for humanity. Let me say it again. Code red for humanity.
Code red for humanity. Of course, he never explains what that means. You're going to have to check your book of science to find out. Of course, in the details, they don't offer as many details now because they've all been wrong. But to the extent they do, they are provably wrong over time. So the question is, why are we still being bullied by these people? It has nothing to do with saving the Earth. They hate the Earth. They hate nature. It's about controlling us. And maybe we should recognize that.
So, wow, a lot to unpack there, but as you can see, Tucker did a phenomenal job of laying out the lies, the constant goal shifting, right? And even the terminology changing, right? We went from an ice age to, global warming, to now climate change, right? Because each time they've gotten it wrong. There's cults out there that predict doomsday, and each time they predicted a doomsday would happen, it didn't happen. And that's what I kind of feel like this climate change thing is. It's like a cult. Am I saying that we shouldn't care about the Earth? No. Am I saying that we shouldn't do what we can to protect it and make sure and assure that it's as clean as possible? Of course we should. But what's going on is these people are creating fear. They're fear mongering, right? And why? Well, let's delve into that. But before we do, let's hear a little bit more, because there's still prominent Democrats in addition to Biden and Obama. Think about this. Obama actually talked about rising sea levels at one point. I don't have the clip, but then he goes out and buys a oceanfront property at Martha's Vineyard. I mean, these are questions that at the very least people should be asking. It's like, that doesn't make sense with your belief. If you really believe that oceans are going to rise and the coastline is going to be overtaken by water, wouldn't you buy property up in the mountains, high up, away from that? I mean, that's just logical thinking, in my opinion. But let's go in and let's take a look at what our favorite drama queen says, right? Let me bring her up.
Well, not issuing sad, self-effacing apologies for their own skin color, top Democrats are warning that if we don't give them full control of the U.S. economy right now, the world will literally be destroyed.
The world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is how are we going to pay for it? And this is the war. This is our World War II.
This is our final chance. The scientists are absolutely unanimous on this. that we have no more than 12 years to take incredibly bold action on this crisis.
It's just pathetic. But this show cares about science, and so we want to assess the claim critically and scientifically. Do we really have 12 years left? That's what they're saying. Is it true? Daniel Turner is Executive Director at Power the Future and joins us tonight. Mr. Turner, thanks very much for coming on. So just throw that right to you. Do we have 12 years left? Is there science that shows that?
Actually, the Associated Press today debunked that, which was pretty fascinating for someone who studies energy and environmental issues, to see the Associated Press walk that back and say, we have never said there are 12 years left to fix climate change, but Beto has said it, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has said it, and the scientists who wrote this UN report have said, that is a made-up statistic that you all have extrapolated. It's interesting that they finally issued the report now.
Hold on, slow down. That's the party of science.
Yes.
We know that. They had a march for science after Trump got elected. You remember that?
Yes.
Because they believe in science and we don't. And we believe, obviously, in snake handling.
Kids marched out of class on Friday for science.
For science, but this doesn't sound like science.
No, the 12 years number is what the scientists said based upon the Paris Climate Accords. This is where we would like to get by 2030. This happened in 2018. So by 2030, we want to get here. Somehow that number became, if we don't do it in 12 years, the end of the world is imminent. And Beto has said that. Like I said, numerous Democrats have run on that issue. When Beto announced the other day, that clip that you just showed, he said that there was unanimous consensus among scientists that we had 12 years left to fix this. And so it is nonsense that they've repeated this over and over again, and it never gets, as you said in your first segment, it never gets corrected and no one apologizes.
So these are basically people you're saying who believe that Bill Nye is actually a science guy and not just a buffoon created by television.
Exactly.
Okay.
And what I'd love to ask these folks, I remember a report in 1989, I was a freshman in high school when it came out, that said we had 10 years left. By the year 2000, we had to fix climate change. What did they get wrong then? The same UN panel, by the way, issued both reports. What did they get wrong then that they are so certain that they have now that we have to fix climate change?
It sounds like a lot of what they say is just an effort to immediately take the moral high ground and, holding the moral high ground, do whatever they want to the country.
Yeah, when you do things under the guise of protecting Mother Earth or for the planet or for the children, which is what a lot of them say. Remember those kids who stormed Dianne Feinstein's office a little while ago. When you do things for the planet, you are given a really wide berth. And so it is taking over the healthcare industry. It's taking over basically all employment. It's putting out of work millions of people who work in the energy industry. Funny that Beto wasn't talking about these things when he was running against Ted Cruz a couple months ago.
It's just fun. I mean, I think of myself as a pretty ardent conservationist, as someone who loves the outdoors and spends a lot of time there. If they care so much about the environment, why are their cities filthy? The cities that they run, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, they're cesspools.
And why don't, in their personal lives, they dictate what they want government to mandate? Bernie Sanders prefers to fly on private jets. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez prefers to take the shuttle on American Airlines to Amtrak. Now, Penn Station, I don't blame her. I would much rather take the shuttle, the airline as well.
But doesn't that tell you don't want to go to Penn Station because it's disgusting? You don't want to walk down the street in the Mission District in San Francisco because there's human waste and hypodermic needles. How should I take someone seriously as an environmentalist if they don't pick up the trash in front of their own building?
They're unable to run their cities now, but somehow if they are given more power to run all of government, to employ basically the entire nation, including those unwilling to work, as they mentioned, somehow they'll be able to fix things. They can't run Amtrak well now. What makes us think that they will build a national automotive grid or train railroads?
I feel like a lot of conservatives, Republicans certainly, are on the defensive as soon as these people start talking and they say, climate is a problem. Instead of just saying you have no idea what you're talking about, there's no reference in science to what you're saying. You're a demagogue and a liar. Why does nobody say that?
I wish they would just point out what actually fossil fuels does for our country, what it does for our economy, the quality of life that we have. The kids who were marching just on Saturday were all with smartphones. There was a girl who had a plastic Fiji water bottle. Does she not know that? And saying, stop fossil fuels. Does she not know where fossil fuels come from and what they do?
what plastic is made of? Thank you very much for that perspective. I appreciate it.
So, we can see right there another great segment where they're just showing the hypocrisy. They're showing the incorrect information that these people are given, right? The fear mongering. 12 years, right? This was back in what, 2018 this video happened, or between 2018, I think the 2018 was when the report happened, and maybe they cited it in 2020 between the drama queen and the Hispanic, Beto O'Rourke. No, he's not. He's not Hispanic, right? Anyhow, so again, it's great highlight to what we've been seeing decades now, decades of fear mongering. And my concern is that these people, due to the fear mongering, instead of us being able to, when there's an actual emergency or an actual alert happening and going and all unanimously coming together to fix it, what happens is now they're creating like the boy who cries wolf, right? It's like, oh, you know, rising sea levels. And then you've got the other side like, dude, you've been saying that for 40, 50 years now. You know, I don't believe you. It takes away from when there's an actual concern, when there's an actual issue, right? So that's the problem. And then again, their hypocrisy, right? Are they practicing what they're preaching? You know, for example, Ocasio-Cortez is a socialist, self-proclaimed. So you know how hypocritical it is for you to be a socialist under the protection of a capitalistic country, or under the protection of a capitalistic system? Like, practice what you preach. Is she giving away 50, 60, 70% of her income? Of course not. How many illegal immigrants has she taken into her apartment in DC? None. How many illegal immigrants are going in? How many people are living in the 3 houses that Bernie Sanders have? None. I have not met one single socialist, and I just had a debate with one last week. I've not met one single socialist that practices what they preach. I asked them, hey, give me 50, 60, 70% of your income. Nope. Who are you helping out? Who are you giving that 50, 60, 70% to? No one. Who are you taking? Nothing. They claim that they're paying their taxes. Well, how's that different than anybody else? They're a bunch of hypocrites. Here, speaking of hypocrites, let's look at John Kerry.
Meanwhile, President Biden has vowed to cut down on carbon emissions. He may want to start with his own climate czar, John Kerry. Why? Well, new data shows that Kerry's private jet has raked in frequent flyer miles in recent years, including a 2019 trip to Iceland. And here's the funny part. He went to Iceland to accept an award for climate leadership. When asked about the hypocrisy at the time, back in 2019, here's how Mr. Kerry responded.
It's the only choice for somebody like me. The time it takes me to get somewhere. I can't sail across the ocean. I have to fly to meet with people and get things done. But what I'm doing almost full time is working to win the battle of climate change. I'm not going to be put on the defensive.
Of course not.
In other words, rules for thee and not for me. And that's the typical MO. How many people did we see that they ordered lockdowns for their constituents and for, you know, the people that they're supposed to govern, but it didn't apply to them, right? How many times we saw Obama giving a birthday party, right? No worries there. We saw Nancy Pelosi going into getting her hair done, as well as the former a mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, and her excuse was, look, I'm in the public eye. I need to have my haircut done. I need to have my, again, the hypocrisy, rules for thee, not for me. Listen, if any of these people actually preached or did what they preach, maybe we would listen. But because they don't, we shut them down. One more video regarding climate reparations. We looked at this a couple of months ago, but there's something in here that's really interesting that I really want you guys to take a listen to.
You can watch the whole thing, by the way, right now, if you're interested, on Fox Nation. So fossil fuels aren't just something we have. Fossil fuels are the reason that we have civilization. Take them away, and countries collapse. And the Biden administration doesn't appear to realize that, or maybe they do realize that, but they're doing it anyway. They just announced a $1 billion fund for something called climate reparations, because you have sinned against the climate. You discriminated against the climate. So the idea is to send your money, to other countries, because apparently we have too much money now, our debt isn't big enough, countries that have, quote, suffered damages due to the use of fossil fuels. But here's the best part. The country that uses the most fossil fuels, that emits the most pollution, that dumps the most plastic into our ocean, killing the most marine life, that kills the most fish with factory fishing, the country that seems almost determined to destroy the planet, that would be China, is exempted from the reparations. That's because China, which has a bigger economy than ours, the biggest in the world, is, quote, a developing nation. So that's like the definition of insanity.
So every single article that I've seen every single article that I've seen regarding this topic, it points who the biggest contributors of air pollution and water pollution are, and it's the continent of Asia. It's the country of Asia, right? You know, India, unfortunately, and you've got the continent of Africa. The biggest proponents of pollution, of water pollution and air pollution, are those three regions. So no matter what we do on this side, I mean, I could understand the move or the shift if this was a global endeavor. I would be like, okay, at least the entire world's into this. But if you've got huge countries, a continent, massive amounts of land and government, and they're not on board, and they're contributing high amounts, that no matter what we do on this side, theirs is overwhelming. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense unless, like, it doesn't make sense in the sense of what they're on the surface they're trying to do, right, which is save the planet. That's not really why they're doing it, right? They know the data, they know it. They know the details. They know how much carbon emissions is coming out of China. They know all the pollution that's going on over there in the rivers and oceans. They know those things. So then why? Why are they constantly moving this goalpost? Why does anybody do anything when you're that high up? I think I have the answer. Let's listen here. This one's an old one, but it's still very relevant to this day.
I resent you calling me a denier. That is a word meant to put me down. I'm a skeptic about climate change, and I want to make it darn clear, Mr. Kenny's not a scientist. I am. He's the CEO of the Weather Channel now. I was the founder of the Weather Channel, not the co-founder.
And I'm glad you did, because I am addicted to the Weather Channel. I watch a lot of cable news.
Now, hold on just a minute. I'm not done. And CNN has taken a very strong position on global warming that it is a consensus. Well, there is no consensus in science. Science isn't a vote. Science is about facts. And if you get down to the hard, cold facts, there's no question about it. Climate change is not happening. There is no significant man-made global warming now. There hasn't been any in the past, and there's no reason to expect any in the future. There's a whole lot of baloney, and yes, it has become a big political point of the Democratic Party and part of their platform, and I regret it's become political instead of scientific, but the science is on my side.
I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion about the topic right here. What I do wonder, though, is when you see...
because you wouldn't allow it to happen on CNN, but I'm happy that I got on the air and got a chance to talk to your viewers. Hello, everybody. There is no global warming.
What I do wonder is when you see the government, when you see NASA, when you see other institutions say that 97% of climate scientists agree, do you think they're making it up? What I don't understand is how you square that.
That's a manipulated figure, and let me explain it to you. The government puts out about $2.5 billion directly for climate research every year. It only gives that money to scientists who will produce scientific results that support the global warming hypothesis of the Democrat Party position. So they don't have any choice. If you're going to get the money, you got to support their position. Therefore, 97% of the scientific reports published support global warming. Why? Because those are the ones the government pays for, and that's where the money is. It's real simple, but that doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't make it true. That only makes it bought and paid for. The money goes in circles.
I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to try to refute you on the facts.
That's the truth.
I'll simply say that the vast majority...
Please stand back from this issue and let the two sides be on the air. There are 31,000 scientists who have signed a petition that says it is not valid, that my position is correct. And we'll keep battling, and we will prevail in time.
And there you have it. The founder, right, of the Weather Channel, coming out. I don't know how long ago that was. 8+ years ago, came on and said that. And the final piece. First of all, before I get into any commentating, I want to give a shout out to Mark Dice, who does the voice of Brian Stelter. Oh, every time that guy talks now, all I hear is Mark Dice's voice over in my head. I'm gonna try and do it when I edit this, and if I can't, then I'm gonna leave it as is. But if I can, I'm gonna mimic it. Shout out to Mark Dice on that. But what's interesting about this gentleman is the fact that he lays out the detail. He lays out the the motive, right? And it's money. Money. These people are going to get funded if they say X, Y, Z, right? And I remember going through an anthropology class back in college, and the professor had talked about how how the process of discovery of a new bone or a new species and so on and so forth, and the process, right? And innocent me, and I'm like, why do you have to go through this? Why is there so much scrutiny in this process? Like, I always thought that scientists were just all about science and facts. And here's what she said: in a comfortable or in a sane world or in an innocent world, yeah, that would be true. But the fact that there's money involved, right? You would be the first at this and that. And she went on to explain all of these benefits of the benefit that you get from finding this, right? And so if it's not authentic, which in many cases there have been situations where people have made false claims scientifically to get those benefits, and it's just so sad. That's why we cannot take these people at face value. That's why I live by the motto of question everything. And ever since when you look at the examples that I laid out in my opening monologue, you have to question it, because these people are not for you. They are for themselves. That's why we call them the elitists, right? They only care about themselves. They only care about the money. They only care about the power. They don't really care about the little people or the average person. They could care less about it. So, folks, please question everything, no matter who it comes from. And if you're seeing specific lies coming from a particular person, a particular company, a particular group, stop listening to them. This movement of climate hysteria has gone on far and long enough, and it needs to stop. Yes, the climate does change. Yes, we should all do our part, but that does not mean giving the government more money and more power and more control. Guys, that's all I have. Until next time, thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you guys